Michael Kirby, lovely to be talking with you again.
Good to be here.
The problem of ageing is one that affects all communities. Are there particular vulnerabilities for the LGBTQI community?
Yes, the particular vulnerability is the deal that was made during their growing up between society and them. You keep quiet about your sexual orientation. You keep it strictly to yourself. Do not confront us with the awful reality of your difference, and we'll leave you alone.
I think the Deputy Prime Minister at one stage said, "Don't shove it in my face," I think was the expression he used during the marriage equality debate. So that was a reiteration of the deal.
Yes, exactly. And that is in the minds of most LGBTIQ people of my age and 20 years younger than my age. That is what they grew up with. So that as they get older, they have the disadvantage that often they don't have the same family arrangements. They've not been given the same rights to marriage and relationship recognition. They've had to live in isolation and in silence about their relationships, and therefore they internalise the feeling of less worth. So you can change the laws, but that doesn't do the trick. You've got to somehow have people in the aged care help area that will be aware of this particular problem and will be striving to overcome it.
And so if you've internalised the view that you're a less worthwhile member of society, particularly if you want to be out about who you are, what risks does that put you at as an older person?
Well, first, it's not only internalising the gay older person, it's also internalising those of the same age that are moving in the same social set. That's what they grew up with, and they don't see anything wrong with it. In fact, they think you should just keep it to yourself and keep it as a very private thing. But the problem that it presents is how especially in aged care facilities, they can put out memorabilia of people they've loved. They can have photographs of their lover or friend, or that they can be open, including with family members. Some family members don't want to have openness about this issue. So it's a complex challenge in a time of transition. It will eventually get better and better. The law will help it to get better and better. But what I wanted to say was it's going to take time, and it's going to have a few opponents, and it's going to have people who are insensitive, who keep banging on about family values, often when they themselves are not entirely open and honest and have a little bit of hypocrisy about those values. So we've got to do better than we've been doing in Australia. 40% voting against marriage equality was not a good outcome, in my opinion.
And can you think of some examples of circumstances that an older LGBTQI person might face, perhaps in a nursing home or in any other situation where they're ageing, where because of the deal they might end up with poorer health outcomes or in an abusive situation?
First, there would be a cohort of the older gay residents who are living with HIV, and now that is a treatable disease, and it's able to be done. But that will put them in situations of medical dependency and maybe difficulties of securing and keeping privacy, and that may endanger their health outcomes. But similarly, there are the difficulties of forming relationships, having relationships in aged care facilities, having relationships of affection and also sexual activity. I mean, this does happen. It's a shocking outcome for many middle-aged and younger people, but it does happen, and therefore there has to be a recognition that the people who were of the flower generation, who went in 1968 to San Francisco with flowers in their hair, they're now quite elderly people, and they have the attitudes coming along which are going to be different, and they will challenge some gay people but also some straight people in aged care facilities.
And you were saying that there's a particular risk of a cultural clash with some people who are working in aged care facilities who might come from called backgrounds which are much more conservative or have a different view of gay life.
We couldn't run our hospitals in Australia without very large numbers of people who are from communities in our neighbourhood, in the world, which are rather hostile, sometimes very hostile, sometimes deadly hostile towards LGBT people. Aged care facilities are not necessarily hospitals, but they are institutions with a need for large numbers of nursing and attendant staff, some of whom will not have come along the journey we've had in Australia in the last 20 or 30 years. And so you can't just enact a law or change a law. You can't just take out of the aged care law that aged care facilities may discriminate if that is required by their religion. That was taken out in 2013.
Which is extraordinary that it was only 5 years ago that was removed, the capacity to discriminate and say, no, you can't come into this aged care facility because you're gay. And we don't have gay people here.
Well, you say it's extraordinary, but just 3 months ago we had the vote on marriage equality. We are one of the last countries of the Western world to have taken that step. Now, why was that so? Basically, as we now know, because of the survey, it was because a group of very conservative politicians who had very strong views on this and were really reflecting their private religious views in public life. They insisted on the survey, and they would not allow the matter to be dealt with in the normal way in Parliament, which would have meant it was done earlier. And so, I mean, we've still got a lot of journeying to do in Australia on this issue. And I think the way we will make the extra steps in the journey is by gay people standing up and saying, look at me, do you really hate me? Do you really feel I'm less worthy? Because I'm not going to go along any longer with the deal. I'm not going to pretend I'm straight. It's getting a bit late in my life to pretend I'm straight, but it was a very good thing that my partner, Johan, insisted. He said, we've got to be open and honest, otherwise nothing in this country will ever change. And I think it is changing, but it has been slow and there's still work to do.
What's the role of kindness? There's been a lot of talk about systems changes and community consultation. What's the role of kindness in achieving this type of change?
I'll answer that in a slightly indirect way. I've always thought, sort of as a lawyer, that the fundamental basis of universal human rights, and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights will celebrate its 70th anniversary this year, 2018. The fundamental basis is love for one another, empathising enough with a person who is actually a stranger to you to understand they have their life, they have their needs, they have their feelings, and so I think the fundamental basis of universal human rights is love, and love is kindness to one another and love for one another. And so I think we need a little kindness and we need a little love and we need less judgmentalism and we need better empirical data and scientific data. We need more education in schools and in the community. And when we have all these things, things will get better.
I was speaking with Sally Goldner from Transgender Victoria, Bisexual Alliance Victoria and Trans Family. And, you know, content warning, she was telling me stories about the sorts of things that can happen to transgender people in hospitals and healthcare systems as they age. And she talked about people being denied the hormones they need to retain their identity in aged care facilities. She talked to me about the difficulty that someone who presents as a man faces when he comes to the GP's office and someone says, well, why do you need a long consultation? And what's he going to shout out? I need a pap smear, I still have a cervix, and I don't want to have cervical cancer, and similarly for prostate and issues like that. And then if you look behind that and you note that I think there's only 2 jurisdictions in Australia that will allow you to change your birth certificate once you've made that transition to a different gender. You know, to what extent does the law lead community attitudes or the other way around?
Well, the law can help to lead community attitudes, but in Australia it sometimes takes an awful long while. For example, we had the criminal laws against gay people, against me, that lasted in Australia up till 1998. So, and the last state to get rid of it was Tasmania in 1998. So we are slow moving, and our system of government, our federal system, instead of being inventive, is just very slow moving, and we're amongst the slowest in the nation, in the world, and we also don't have a national Bill of Rights that would give a stimulus to this. But you're right to say, of all the journeys that are taken in the LGBTIQ group, the T, the transgender, they have the hardest journey of all, because they have discrimination within the gay community, and they also have ignorance about their needs in the LGBTIQ community. So we need much better education of that, and we need more of them being public figures and being able to explain to others. It was my partner who said, we've got to stand up. We've got to be open and honest about this. He's from the Netherlands, and their culture is just not the same. They're not like Anglo-Celts or the Asian Australian community, willing to go along with a little bit of hypocrisy and silence. They're in your face. That's their culture. And so I was the beneficiary of that, and we need a few more Netherlands trannies around to get them out and about and faced, because their journey is in many ways the hardest of them all, and particularly if they proceed to the operation, which is one of the most radical operations a human being can undergo. And therefore we need their leaders, we need them to speak. Laws are good, they're necessary, but we need education and we need understanding and we need a little bit of love.
Wonderful to talk to you, Michael.